The morning air was crisp, carrying with it the faint smell of dew and freshly cut grass. The small suburban neighborhood was waking up slowly, neighbors watering their gardens, dogs barking behind fences, and cars humming as people hurried off to work. But in the Miller household, everything was unusually quiet, heavy with an unspoken tension. On the porch sat Emily, just 8 years old, her favorite war, now teddy bear squished tightly against her chest. Its fur was faded from years of love, one button eye missing, but to her it was still perfect. She was waiting, her small legs swinging nervously off the porch steps, her big brown eyes locked on the narrow road that wound toward their house. She didn't care about breakfast or cartoons this morning. She cared only about one thing. Her brother was coming home, Daniel Miller, 24 years old, strong shoulders, sandy blonde hair, and a smile that could melt away the darkest day. To Emily, he wasn't just her brother, he was her hero. He had been since the day she was born. Their bond was something unshakable, built on bedtime stories, tickle fights, and his quiet promise that as long as he was around, nothing could ever hurt her. But this time felt different. Emily had overheard the whispers, her mom crying softly in the kitchen when she thought no one was listening, her dad pacing the hallway with a clenched jaw. Words like deployment and danger floated through the air, words too big for an 8-year-old to fully understand, but heavy enough to make her heart squeeze. The moment she heard the crunch of boots on gravel, Emily's heart leapt. She dropped her teddy bear and dashed down the porch steps barefoot, her small feet slapping against the driveway. "Danny," she squealed, her voice breaking into a laugh and a sob all at once. Daniel turned at the sound, already smiling as he set down his duffel bag. His uniform was pressed, his boots dusty from travel, but his eyes, those gentle blue eyes, lit up when they saw her. He bent down just in time to catch her as she launched herself into his arms. He lifted her easily, spinning her around. "There's my girl," he said, pressing his cheek against her hair. "I missed you so much, Em." Emily clung to his neck like she never wanted to let go. Her little fingers dug into the fabric of his uniform. "Don't go again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Please, Danny, stay here, stay with me." Daniel's smile faltered for just a second, but he quickly kissed the top of her head. "I have to go, Bug," he said gently. "It's my job. I have to help people. You know that, right?" Emily pulled back just enough to look at his face. Her eyes were wide and wet, her bottom lip quivering. "But who's gonna help me when you're gone?" That question tore at Daniel's heart. He had been preparing for months, training, packing, hardening himself for the mission ahead. But nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared him for this moment, for the look in his little sister's eyes. He knelt down, still holding her close. "I'll always help you, Em, even if I'm far away. Every night, when you look up at the stars, I'll be looking at them too. That means I'm right there with you, okay?" Emily sniffled, trying to believe him. She glanced up at the sky, the morning sun too bright for stars, but she nodded anyway. "Promise, promise," Daniel said firmly, pinky extending toward her. She wrapped her tiny pinky around his, sealing the sacred deal they'd been making since she could talk. Their parents stepped onto the porch quietly, watching the scene unfold. Their mother's eyes were red from sleepless nights, her hands twisting nervously in her apron. Their father stood tall, but his clenched fists betrayed the storm inside him. They knew how dangerous the world was where Daniel was headed, but they also knew how strong his sense of duty was. For the rest of the morning, Emily shadowed Daniel's every step. When he sat at the kitchen table, she was on his lap, listening as he joked with their parents. When he unpacked his small stash of gifts, a stuffed puppy for her, a charm bracelet he'd bought overseas, she squealed with delight and hugged him tighter. Every laugh she gave felt like sunlight cutting through the heaviness that hung in the air. But in the quiet moments, the fear crept back in. Emily noticed how her mom's smile would falter when Daniel wasn't looking, or how her dad would leave the room abruptly, unable to hide his emotions. She noticed how Daniel's eyes lingered on everything, as if memorizing the details of home, the creak in the stairs, the way the curtains swayed in the breeze, the chipped corner of the family photo frame on the mantel. That night, after dinner, Emily crawled into Daniel's room before bed. He was sitting on the edge of his bed, staring at his neatly folded uniform. She hesitated in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear before whispering, "Can I sleep here tonight?" Daniel's face softened instantly. "Of course, Bug. Come here." She climbed into bed, curling against his side. For a long time, she didn't speak. She just listened to the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, as if trying to memorize it. Finally, in a small voice, she asked, "What if the monsters are real this time? What if they get you and I can't wake you up?" Daniel tightened his arm around her. "Monsters aren't real, Em. And even if they were, I'd fight them all. You know why? Why?" She asked, her voice muffled against his chest. "Because I promised you, and I never break my promises." She tilted her head up, searching his face for any cracks in his confidence. But Daniel's gaze was steady, filled with the kind of strength only soldiers carried, the strength to be brave even when they were scared. Emily didn't know if she fell asleep or not, but she remembered the warmth of his hug, the steady rise and fall of his chest, and the faint hum of him whispering an old lullaby they used to share. The next morning came too quickly. The house was quiet again, but this time it was heavier, almost suffocating. The car was packed, Daniel's duffel resting by the door. Emily's small hand clung desperately to his as they walked outside. Her teddy bear dangled from her other arm, its stitched smile mocking her sadness. At the curb, Daniel knelt one last time, pulling her into the tightest hug yet. He breathed in her scent, bubblegum, shampoo, and childhood innocence, and held her as if time might stop if he just refused to let go. Emily buried her face in his neck. "Don't go," she whispered again, softer this time, almost like a prayer. Daniel's throat tightened. He kissed her forehead, memorizing the feel of her warm skin under his lips. "I'll be back, Bug, you'll see, and when I do, I want you to tell me all the stories I missed, okay?" Tears streamed down Emily's cheeks as she nodded, though her heart didn't believe him. She clung tighter, as if her little arms could somehow keep him home. Finally, their father cleared his throat, the sound breaking the fragile silence. "Son, it's time." Daniel closed his eyes, willing himself to stay strong. He gently pried Emily's arms from his neck, kissed her trembling hands, and stood. But before stepping into the car, he turned back, crouched again, and pulled her into one last hug, longer, tighter, filled with all the love words couldn't carry. That was the hug Emily would never forget. The hug that branded itself into her memory forever. The warmth, the strength, the way his heartbeat thudded against her ear like a drum of life. And then, with one last smile through tears, Daniel climbed into the car. Emily stood frozen on the driveway, teddy bear clutched to her chest, watching as the car drove away, carrying her hero toward a world she couldn't understand. The house behind her seemed suddenly bigger, emptier. She whispered into the silence, "Come back, Danny. Please come back." But the only answer was the fading sound of the car engine, leaving her with the ghost of his last hug. The days after Daniel left were the hardest Emily had ever known. The house felt hollow, like someone had pulled the heart right out of it. His laughter no longer echoed down the hallways, his heavy boots no longer thudded across the floor, and his warm hugs were gone, replaced with the cold emptiness of waiting. At first, Emily would wake up every morning rushing to the window, convinced that maybe, just maybe, he had come back early. But every time she pulled back the curtains, she saw only the same quiet street and the same empty driveway. Letters became her lifeline. Every 2 weeks, sometimes longer, an envelope would arrive with Daniel's neat handwriting scrawled across the front. Emily would tear it open with trembling hands, her eyes scanning the words as if they were magic spells that kept him safe. "Dear Bug, I hope you're being good for Mom and Dad. I miss you every day. Out here it's dusty and hot, and I don't get pancakes with smiley faces. But I think of you whenever I see the stars. Remember our promise. I'm keeping it. Be brave for me. Love you always, Danny." Emily carried those letters everywhere. She tucked them under her pillow at night, pressed them into her backpack during school, and read them out loud to her teddy bear when she was lonely. She even kept the envelopes, as if the paper itself still held a piece of him. Still, the nights were the hardest. Sometimes she'd wake up crying from dreams where Daniel disappeared into smoke, or where she called for him and he never answered. Her mom would rush in, holding her close, whispering soothing words, but Emily always felt the same ache deep in her chest, the kind of ache no lullaby could chase away. As weeks turned into months, Emily grew more attached to the last hug she'd shared with Daniel. She remembered every detail, the warmth of his arms, the scratch of his uniform against her cheek, the steady thump of his heart. It became her shield. Whenever the fear came creeping in, she closed her eyes and pretended she was back in his arms, safe and protected. One evening, she and her mom sat on the porch watching the sunset. Emily leaned against her mother, staring at the horizon. "Do you think Danny can see the same sky?" she asked softly. Her mom smiled through watery eyes. "Yes, sweetheart, no matter where he is, the sky connects you both." That night, Emily whispered up at the stars, "Good night, Danny, I love you." It became her ritual, a nightly prayer that tied her to him. But war has a cruel way of stealing time. One chilly autumn morning, the knock came. Emily was at the kitchen table drawing a picture of her and Daniel at the park, crayons scattered around her. When she heard the knock, she looked up to see 2 men in uniform standing at the door. Her mother's face went pale as she opened it, her hands trembling. Emily didn't understand at first. She just saw the envelope in their hands, the solemn expressions, the way her mother collapsed against the doorframe with a sob that shook the whole house. Her father stood stiff, tears running silently down his face as he wrapped his arms around his wife. Emily dropped her crayon. The picture she'd been drawing blurred before her eyes. She ran to her mom, tugging on her sleeve. "What's wrong? What happened?" Her mother pulled her close, voice breaking. "Baby, Danny's not coming home." The words didn't make sense. They couldn't be real. Emily shook her head fiercely. "No, he promised me. He said he'd come back. He can't break a promise." Her father knelt down, his face crumpling. "Sweetheart, he tried. He was so brave. He saved his friends." But his voice cracked. He couldn't finish. Emily screamed, the sound raw and piercing. She ran to Daniel's room, slamming the door shut, throwing herself on his bed. His scent still lingered faintly on the pillow. She buried her face in it, sobbing until her chest hurt. For days, the house was filled with silence and grief. Neighbors brought food, relatives whispered condolences, but nothing filled the gaping hole Daniel left behind. Emily refused to believe it. At night, she still whispered to the stars, her small voice trembling. "Good night, Danny. I know you can still hear me. Please hear me." The funeral came. Soldiers folded a flag with precision, their movements sharp and reverent. One of them knelt in front of Emily, handing her the flag as if it were treasure. But to her, it felt heavy, suffocating. She clutched it tightly, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. When it was her turn to speak, Emily stood before the crowd, her little legs trembling. She held Daniel's last letter in her hands. Her voice cracked as she read aloud, "Dear Bug, remember our promise. Be brave for me." She paused, her lips quivering. Then, with all the strength her small heart could muster, she whispered into the microphone, "I'll be brave, Danny, for you." After the funeral, Emily often sat in Daniel's room, hugging his pillow, clutching his letters. Sometimes she imagined his arms around her, the last hug replaying in her mind like a memory she never wanted to let go of. Years passed. Emily grew taller, older, stronger, but she never forgot. On her high school graduation day, she wore a locket around her neck with Daniel's photo inside. As she walked across the stage, she whispered under her breath, "We did it, Danny." When she struggled, when life felt too heavy, she closed her eyes and remembered that last hug, the strength, the warmth, the love packed into it. It became her anchor, her reminder that even though Daniel was gone, his love would never leave her. Eventually, Emily found her own way to honor him. She started writing letters to soldiers overseas, sending care packages, little reminders that they weren't alone. She volunteered at veterans organizations, telling people about her brother, the hero who never broke his promise. And every night, no matter where she was, she still looked up at the stars and whispered, "Good night, Danny, I love you," because even though his last hug had been years ago, it lived inside her forever, a hug strong enough to carry her through the storms of life. Emily learned that sometimes promises weren't about returning home. Sometimes they were about leaving behind love so powerful it never faded, not even with time, not even with death. Daniel's last hug wasn't just a goodbye. It was a gift, a reminder that she was never truly alone, that his arms would always be around her, invisible but unbreakable. And so, even as the years went on, as Emily grew into a woman, she carried that memory close to her heart. A soldier's last hug to his little sister, her most precious treasure, her eternal shield, her forever promise.